Hi, I'm Grace, and this is the Move to Cantabria podcast, where we celebrate life in Cantabria and give you the tools, support, and confidence to move and live here with ease. Each episode, I'll be joined by locals, expats, and experts who share their stories, insights, and tips to help you understand Cantabrian life, from culture and community to schools, housing, and everyday living. So, grab a coffee, settle in, and let's dive into today's conversation.
Hello, everyone. We're here today for one of our integration stories, and we're joined by Mardi, who's a good friend of mine. And the purpose of these stories is so that you can understand and learn from others who've gone before you. You know, myself and Mardi have been living here for quite a while, and today she's going to share her story of why she's here. What is life like here in Cantabria and in Spain in general? So welcome, Mardi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Grace. It's fun to be with you.
Yeah. So we're both married to Spanish men, which is one of the reasons, I guess, why we're living here. When did you and where did you and Jorge meet? I can't remember this story.
It's a fun story. We met in Malaysia. I was traveling around for 4 months in Southeast Asia by myself, trying to figure out what the next phase of my life would be. And he was traveling with 11 of his Spanish friends from school, and they asked me to take a photo of their group at a temple. And then I started traveling with them for a couple weeks and got to know them. And this was back in the day of Skype. So we continued in conversation to getting to know each other through Skype. And one thing led to another of, hey, what are you going to do? Want to come here? And I happened to be in a space in my life that I wanted that new experience, new adventure. So I picked up and moved to Spain.
When was that?
That was in 2012.
Wow. So 14
Yeah,
years ago.
it was quite a shock for me. I had traveled the world by myself, but I had never been to Spain. So I joke with my husband because I had fallen in love with Italy, and I had always thought that that's where I would end up. But no. So when I met Jorge and we decided that I would come here, I got to experience Spain for the first time when I arrived.
Where were you moving from?
I'm sorry?
Where were you moving from?
So I was in San Francisco.
Where are you from? Let's go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Who are you, Mardi?
Who am I? So I was born in Sacramento, California, but I spent most of my adult life in San Francisco. And so at that time, when I decided to make this giant leap, I sold my house, I quit my job, and I said, let's do it for love. And my husband's from Zaragoza, and I arrived in 2012 in Zaragoza with zero Spanish.
So tell everyone where Zaragoza is, just in case they don't know, because it's not in Cantabria.
No, it's the fifth largest city of Spain, and it's in Aragon, which is sort of the central north part of Spain. It's directly in between, if you go on the high-speed train from Barcelona and Madrid. It's about an hour and a half each way using the high-speed train. So it's very well connected, but it's very different than Cantabria. It's more of to me, more desert-like. And it has more extreme weathers. It's very cold in the winter and very hot in the summer. But I lived there for 6 years before we made a transition, because at that time we had a young son, or I gave birth to a son, and we lived in Zaragoza until he was about 3. And then with my husband's work, we moved to North Carolina for 5 years, to a small town in North Carolina. And then after that, 5 years of that, as much as we enjoyed the adventure, kind of saw the writing on the wall in the United States and felt unsafe, and decided that we wanted to transition to a new place. And we knew we wanted to return to Europe. And so again, with my husband's job, we looked for a position across Europe. And what opened up at the time was a place in Santander, here in Cantabria. So we had visited Cantabria twice, sort of a couple days passing through. It was lovely. It's very beautiful. And that's what I remember was this beautiful city of Santander by the coast, which reminded me of San Francisco because it has the
Yes, of
ocean and the
course.
bay.
Mm,
And we said, well, let's do it. But first things for us was to look at schooling.
mm,
And so our first idea was looking at where we could find the right school for our son. When we found that with the Waldorf Cantabria that's here,
mm,
we said, okay, we can make the move.
mm.
And so we did that in 2000.
I remember when you arrived. So in effect, you've had two arrivals to Spain. So you've had two
Yes.
periods of integrating into Spain. One one as a woman, right? And then the next one, I guess, as a mom. And you transitioned from maiden to mother in Zaragoza as well. And so for people who are thinking or who are moving to Spain, how would you like to describe both of those experiences? How are they different? And what were the things that really helped you in those, and what were the challenges? Because I arrived as a mum.
Yeah.
I became a mum for the second time here, but I was already a mum when I moved here. Where did you learn Spanish, for example? Did you learn Spanish on that first, or was it really on the second?
I feel very fortunate to have moved here when I was without being a mom because I could focus on learning the language. Because moving here with zero language, especially in Zaragoza, was quite challenging. There's not a large expat community, and it was very hard for me to make connections and find my community because I didn't have the language. So I went to the University of Zaragoza and went to school 5 hours a day, 4 days a week for 2.5 years, and then
Wow.
continued with the language schools from the ayuntamiento.
Mm.
For me, it was critically important. I was a very independent person, and to come to Spain and feel that lack of independence impacted my self-esteem a lot
Big time.
because
So
I
tell us
felt
a little
like,
bit about, because I know that you did have, really interesting roles in the States before moving here. And I think that's a topic that's worth talking about, is that how your sense of identity changes when you can't communicate fluently.
I think the hardest part for me was that I was used to working with the press and working with, government officials and politicians and having this, very, very assured, confident position where I could walk in and handle any negotiation, to all of a sudden not having even the ability to go into a bank and ask for assistance or pick up the phone. That was one of my biggest fears, was answering the phone. I never wanted to answer the phone because I couldn't see someone's lips and they were always talking too fast for me. Learning the language was paramount, and my husband helped me a lot. He went around and labeled the entire house. So if I opened a drawer, there was a label. So that really helped me with vocabulary. Meanwhile, I was at the university trying to learn from zero. I
Mm.
think my desire for independence was sort of my push to focus on learning the language, and I was fortunate that that's what I could focus on.
You didn't have other
And
distractions, say, or other commitments that
no,
you could just
no,
dedicate your time and energy
yeah,
and brain capacity.
and brain capacity, and I was eager, I was excited. I
Yeah.
really want to. I mean,
It wasn't a chore, right? It was a wonderful opportunity.
it was kind of like this one wish that I had my whole life. My mother is Puerto Rican, and we grew up with my Puerto Rican family all around me and visiting Puerto Rico. And I had heard Spanish. It was spoken with my grandparents in the home, but my mom never shared it with us.
Mm.
And so it was sort of this missing link of my identity. And so that was another driver of me trying to learn Spanish.
Irony of that you
But
had to the irony of that you had to let go of some of your identity to get a new one. Ooh, there's a book in that, Marty.
it's just always really frustrating as a child or growing up, of, especially in California where, Spanish is a very dominant language. You can live in California only speaking Spanish. So I think that was a big driver and motivator for me because it was sort of this like personal regret
Mm.
or drive. But I'm also a perfectionist. So it was really hard when I would go to speak with people and when I make mistakes or when I couldn't get it right or I couldn't communicate exactly the way I was thinking. Those were the struggles for me. But one advice that somebody gave me that I really appreciated, and it's really true. And at the time I doubted it, but was like, it will come. There's a moment it will all click. And I never really thought, I was like, yeah, right. But it did. There was a moment where you hear it enough, you're immersed in it enough, and you're studying it or working hard enough, it starts clicking. And so I think that that was an amazing moment. And then we left to Spain when it started clicking for me. At that time I was working in Spain. Was working at an organic store. Again, doing something that was like starting from scratch, but it allowed me to communicate with Spaniards. And when I had moments of lapse that I needed to use English, people could ride along with me or help fill in those gaps or understand me.
Mm.
But then when I came back this time, being in the States for 5 years and using Spanish much less, and obviously not being surrounded by it, I felt a drop in my fluency. And so when I returned to Cantabria, I went back to the University of Cantabria to study again and to refresh, I guess. But it was all in the midst of a woman in her late 40s going through perimenopause, when your brain is not working as you would normally expect it to be. So it was a challenge, but something I'm committed to, learning Spanish and being fluent in the language so that I can rival my son's bilingualism is like my ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's not a nice to have. It's a necessity if you really want. Well, it's a necessity, and everyone who is moving with us is really passionate about building a life here, and so to be able to communicate equally it's something that's really worth putting the time and money and effort into doing it, isn't it? So I
Yeah,
met
and
you when
and
you
to be kind to yourself. It's not, you don't have, like, what I've learned is that, it's putting in the effort, as you said, and recognizing that no one expects perfection and everyone appreciates that you're trying.
And I think to recognize that you will always have a slightly different personality in both languages. Do you find that? Like, I'm just not quite as funny in Spanish as I am in English, or, but I see it with, our daughter who's 4.5, and she was born here, and she has a very different personality when she speaks Spanish than when she does English. Whereas son who was born in Australia, it's not as evident because English is his first language, even though he's fluent in both. And so, yeah, it is, I guess it's just natural and to recognize that you don't need to be, I don't know, do you know, like there is a certain difference in the personality when you're speaking both languages because the languages are so different. I notice with you, like there's a difference in you when you speak Spanish to when you speak English.
I think the thing that helped me a lot was I was always really frustrated when I was learning the language that I couldn't get it right. And one day when I listened to a friend of mine who is she's American Spanish.
Mm.
Her mother is Spanish and her father is American. And she grew up bilingual with both languages, and she's my age. And when I sat and I listened to her and she switched, with breeze between the two languages, I realized she had a different tone when she spoke English than when she spoke Spanish. And when I realized I needed to change my voice in order to pronounce the words correctly or to just have the inflection or the
Mm.
expression in
Mm.
Spanish, that's also when things shifted for me, that I gave myself permission to have a different voice in speaking Spanish because it's the nature of this very beautiful language.
It's slightly faster, you know?
Yeah, it's faster, but I also,
Mm. There's a
I
different
have
energy. There is a different feel. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have this American tone in English, but when I'm in Spanish, it sounds more I don't know, more danceable. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the best word. Like
Yeah.
you're gliding through it more so than I do with English.
But I think also now that you're speaking of it, when I speak Australian English, it's slightly different to when I speak Irish English. And maybe, yeah, like, I don't know. I hadn't really thought
Yeah,
about that.
it's when I gave myself the opportunity. It's like, it's okay. You can have a different voice when you speak Spanish. I mean, definitely it's clear. I am a different person when I speak Spanish because I cannot articulate everything at the level that I can in English. And so therefore, I feel like for now, people that I communicate with in Spanish get half of me.
So how did you go making friends? Did
When I
you?
first arrived, it was really challenging. My friends were the women that I worked with or the men and the women I worked with at the organic store, basically, because there were no other. Even those that were in the university with me, they were much younger. by decades. And so there were no connections there. Here in Cantabria, things shifted a lot. I think that's kind of why it feels more comfortable for me, because my language is sufficient enough that I can communicate with Spaniards. But I think when I brought my son to school and I met a community that was of, foreigners as well as Spaniards, but everybody with a common philosophy of how to parent or how to be in the world, then I felt like, oof, this could be something I can grab onto. And that's kind of where our community started, because when you have something in common, a thread in common, then your connections can actually grow. And for us, it started with the schooling, and it was a great place for it to start because that's where we spent most of our time, or was the most important for us.
And that's what I always explain to clients who are coming with kids and that we're helping them with the schooling, or even if they're doing it on their own. It's academics are almost secondary to having the right community, because as parents, you're learning a new language, you're figuring things out, you're working probably, you don't have time to go out and make a circle of friends yourself. So by the easiest and the most natural thing is that if you like the parents of your children's friends, and if there are opportunities to connect regularly so that you can all be together, because obviously Spain is such a family-centered culture, the way we go on a hike once a month with the school community and things like that. But I don't know if you remember, I remember when you and Jorge arrived, and for some reason, it was Jorge's number who was in the group. And I messaged him and I was like, hey, I speak English. And if your wife would like to catch up with me, I would love that. Because there were even back, I arrived at the school in 2020. And when you arrived, there were still very few of us in the school who spoke English. And obviously, it's really important to have Spanish friends and to integrate into community. But there's nothing better than having a cup of tea in English, right? And being able just to converse naturally.
I have to admit, there is a sense of relief of pressure. And I felt that when I first met you. I don't remember that being the first time connecting. I remember the first time being at the school on campus.
With your boots?
When you came up to me. And all I remember, you mentioned something about my rain boots, but what I remember is going, an English speaker. And there's just like, ooh, I can be me. So yes. And it was like, let's get together. Let's have a cup of tea. Let's talk and get to know one another. And I think that was just a wonderful sense of relief. And I will never forget that interaction. And it was like a few minutes in the hallway.
Yeah. And that led to, long before Move to Cantabria was born, you, myself, and Reina got together and had morning tea one morning. And then it just started being a routine and a ritual that we would gather, and more people came and joined us. And the three of us really offered that sense of welcome to new people. And I think that was such a... when I arrived to Cantabria, there were very few people who I could do that with, and I think when you're learning a language, being able to connect with someone on that equal level is such a gift.
Yeah.
And so,
but also the point of welcoming somebody, like there was no welcome for us when we arrived. And actually we hit a lot of really intense roadblocks when we arrived, or hurdles, I would say. So that having that experience myself, of not having that welcome and going and working, in the conversations that we had, it was like, that feels really great to have somebody not have to go through what we went through, because we can give them some support or advice or insight. That is natural, I think, for us. And so having the group and inviting others, because we know how it feels to be isolated or alone. And it doesn't need to be like that. Like, this is a really cool space and a really welcoming environment. So yeah, I think that we continue that to this day. Every time a new member comes into the community, we try our best, I think, to
what I really love now is because it has grown, and obviously, both of us have our businesses now, so we're a little bit less time, but the ethos is there. So, it
Yes.
doesn't, we don't need to be the mother hen with everyone. There will be someone else who can kind of, take this new person under their wing. And I was at a lunch yesterday, and there was a woman there who from another European country, and so our common language was English. And she's been here for a year, and I told her about the group, and she's like, my God, can I please join you? Like the thought of having a cup of tea, and of course it's much more than a cup of tea, but it's, that sense of, that just sense of inclusion is really lovely. And of course now there's, weekend hikes and paddle games and beach hangs with, beach catch ups with all the family, and lots of different events and moments to meet. But yeah, no, definitely the English speaking women in Cantabria is something that we're both very proud of, and it's been
Yes.
an honor and it is an honor to
Hmm.
be the guardian of it with you and with Rena. So
Oh,
that's wonderful. And so
I love cultivating it.
yeah. And so, outside of so the school was really important in finding your
Yeah,
people, and then
for us.
finding international families as well. Because as we said at the very beginning, you and I are both married to Spaniards, so it's not the same as two non-Spanish people moving here and discovering everything together. But how else have you felt that you belong in Cantabria?
Well, I do want to say one thing. Even though my husband is a Spaniard, moving to Cantabria is foreign to him.
Mm.
So everything is unique and new to him, or it was when we arrived as well. He had the language, he had the cultural backdrop of being a Spaniard, but this wasn't familiar territory for him. And him finding community is, even being a Spaniard, was also through the school for us, both in the same way, even having different experiences. So that's something is been unique to watch too, because we had to discover things together here, and at least I could rely a little bit more on him because he's Spanish, but we did discover things together. Remind me of your question again. Sorry, perimenopause brain.
It was about how did you find that sense of belonging? When did you feel as if you were here? But just on that, it is curious to me from time to time that we do have clients who are Spanish and moving from another part of Spain to Cantabria, because things are so unique within each comunidad, and also then, people are busy, and so they just want to
Yeah.
outsource some things to people. But back to you. So that sense of belonging, for me, it was being able to go into the butcher's and order confidently what I wanted and come out with the right thing. Order and then come out with what thought I had asked for as well.
Yeah.
Because
The
even
sense of
doing,
feeling.
I was just going to say, like even doing tutorials in Spanish, right? Like the parent teacher meetings in Spanish, right? Or
Those are rough, mostly because the language is very sophisticated. It's like reading the news or listening to the news. Sometimes it's a little like, I got most of it. I think where I felt like I started belonging or integrating for me was when, and feeling at ease and being able to communicate confidently and to like fully enjoy people and spaces, would be once because one of the biggest stressors for us was finding housing.
mm,
And so that once we kind of settled into that stress could go away. We knew that we had a good school. The housing was the next piece for us. And then from there, I could, continue and improve my Spanish and focus on those connections through morning tea or through other get-togethers.
but even
And
finding,
when that,
where to buy, like, where to buy your organic vegetables, and where to, there is such kind of set up
yes.
not cost, but set up time that's required. For me, it was like, finding my acupuncturist or finding, my circle of team for all those things, because the majority of stuff doesn't exist on Google, right?
No, and it was, word of mouth and trial and error, but it is also, okay, but we have our dentist. We have our organic store. Okay, we have the taller, the mechanics
Yes.
for our car. When you have all those things in place and you don't have those stressors, I mean, I guess it might be fun to kind of ask around and find what people say. And I guess there's an adventure in that. But you're right. When the daily life things are kind of covered and you don't
Mm.
have to worry about them, then you feel like, okay, I'm integrated. For me, one of the things is knowing where I am when I'm driving. I don't know the streets. I don't know the name of streets or the name of the highways. It's too much information to maintain, but I know how to get somewhere or where something is. That was another thing. When I first met a lot of people, because at the school, people lived all over
Mm,
Cantabria,
mm,
people travel and commute, and
mm,
Cantabria is pretty big.
mm,
And people say, oh, I live in this pueblo or in this pueblo. And I was like, "Ugh, where is that?" And so when I got oriented on
mm.
where all of those pueblos were, I felt also that that was another level of being integrated. There was my personal integration, like my grocery store and my, where I'm going to get the best value in gas, to knowing, oh, Laredo, no es Loredo. And where and how long it's going to take to get to those places. And yeah, I think for me, I like being situated and seeing where I am and knowing where I am comfortably. So that geographically has been helpful for me too, to have that knowledge. That took years. That took years. And it's okay. I think I've also had several international moves, much like you, and you kind of get used to that being the unknown or the difficulties that come with that first year transition. And sometimes it's easier. I mean, even when I transitioned to North Carolina, it's my own country,
Okay.
but it is
Yeah.
not my state. It is not my people. It is not my town. And I still had a whole year of trying to figure those things out. But you're right. The minute you figure out the grocery store, your organic grocery store is key, and the school, those two things for me, because those are your daily lives, then we felt like, okay, integrated, and it gives you a sense of calm, you feel.
Does. It has that grounding effect, doesn't it? And I often say to people is, find if you're a coffee drinker, find a cafe that you
Yes.
can go to, every day. So you get that sense of, routine, and that someone will recognize you and say hello. And, I was in the supermarket yesterday, and then a woman said hello to me, another customer said hello to me. And honestly, it was until this morning that I have been thinking about where is she from, but she's one of the girls who works in my pharmacy. And when you see someone out of context and they're like, oh, that's who she is. She always looks after me, and yeah, but it's
With
the sense of
what I was just
achievement, the sense of
go ahead, go.
the sense that you get when
Mhm.
you realize that that has happened is just beautiful.
For me, the other day this happened. The organic store that I go to is small enough that they know me by name, they know my family, they know what I like, they know what I don't like, and I do appreciate that it's like mom and pop, and I can go there or I can message them, and they will think of me or save something or let me know when something's coming in, and that
They have your
when
back.
you have that level of comfort,
Mm,
there is sort of like, yes, this is my place. This is
yeah,
my place.
yeah. So what I'd like to talk about now is that reinvention. That it was fine studying Spanish and spending your days being a mom and doing that, but similar to me, I guess you got that urge to do something more. And I think that you're such a wonderful example of you had a very you had a big career in the States, and you came here, and that career couldn't transition to here. And so you, through necessity and then obviously personal experience, which led you to on your what's the word, to give you the desire to want to enter into this field that we're going to talk about. But how there's a kind of a journey that a person needs to go through before they can start a business, in a way, right? It's like, you need to get to a point of, who am I, to then figure out who you want to be in this next phase of life. So do you want to talk to me? So you started a wonderful consultancy helping women through perimenopause called the Third P. I am a proud client of yours, and without you, I always compare you, and I don't know if you'll agree, but how it is for me, right, is that when we were preparing for the birth of both of our children, we invested in a lot of birth education, the theory, the embodiment, the practical, as to preparing for a beautiful birth. And for me, as I go through my perimenopausal journey, you are that guide that helps me advocate for myself when I am talking to my medical team about about achieving what I need to achieve the outcome that I want to achieve. So, how did you go from being a stay-at-home mom to creating this wonderful business of yours?
I think reinvention is something that we probably will do many times in our life. So I had this early phase career that led me through my 20s and 30s. And then I had this decade of getting to be a mom, which is a privilege and an honor and a choice. And now that my son is 12 years old, as he was reaching, 10 years old, he was more independent, obviously, and I had more free time. And it was this moment of now, what do I want to do with my life? As you mentioned, my previous career is not transferable here, but it made me think about what are the needs here that, that I could meet that need. But it also coincided with a very intense shift in my personal life going through the menopause transition. And I struggled a lot. It started when I was in the States and nobody had answers and I had no idea what was going on. And then when I came here, it was the same. And so there was this similarity of this is not, this is a universal experience that all women of a certain age will pass through. And I was suffering and I was lost and I didn't understand the system here or the culture here around women's health. And for me, it was a unique pivot, but not so unrealistic because I had always been an advocate in my heart, always trying to support in whatever work professionally or personally
Mm.
to those that, need support. And I see that as a place of privilege to be able to do that. And when I realized doing my own self-study in this world of women's health, it was wow, the suffering, universal suffering of women not being heard, not understanding their physiology by no fault of their own, and not being supported by the system around them or understanding the system around them. Because when you move to a new country, the healthcare system from the US is black and white to the healthcare system here in Europe, and
Mm.
especially in Spain.
Mm.
And that difference is stark and can seem daunting because you have some expectations when you come in that you do have to dismiss because it isn't the same. And so for me, it was this natural evolution of like, I want to help myself as I'm going through this and I'm doing all these things and I'm learning all these things. Why can't I naturally share that with other women here who are experiencing that? And that is both Spanish women and also extranjeros or foreigners that come to have the same lack of understanding and knowledge from where they come from regardless, and are confronted with a healthcare system, again, regardless of where they are in the world, that isn't prepared to support them. And so for me, it was this natural reinvention of, well, being a true feminist, that women need to be just as connected and supported to care for themselves and to be heard in this transition than ever before, because there's no room for suffering. When a woman feels well, everyone around them
Mm.
benefits.
Mm.
And that is a true driver of the work that I do, is just supporting other women. It's much like us setting up morning tea. It was making women feel like they were welcome and supported and they had a place to turn. My work naturally, curved into that, into finding and supporting those women who aren't understanding, who are feeling lost and isolated, and empowering them to support whatever they need through this transition to understand it, but also to advocate for what they deserve in their care. It's a mighty feat. The world is not set up to support us during this transition. So there's a lot of work we're going to do so that your daughter doesn't have to go through it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think the value that you bring, being able to do those cultural translations and, advise someone how to navigate the medical system while also layering on that, the layman translation of all of the medical, studies and jargon that they have, I don't have the capacity to decipher is really a very valuable service that you offer for people. And I do love how that, with both of the transitions into these businesses for both of us have been so natural. For me, we created Move to Cantabria because this service doesn't exist apart from us. And it's the type of thing that I would have benefited from so much. And so would you. So would you if we'd been earlier and started before you arrived. Because, with Move to Cantabria, we take care of all of those basic requirements, bureaucracy, residency, schools, home, to allow you to start living faster. And
Yeah.
similarly with you, it's like perimenopause shouldn't be something that slows you down or affects you. You should be able to keep pedaling the same, and keep going with whatever is required to help you do that. But you shouldn't, you should be able to access freely and without shame and without having arguments with medical people to get what you need, because we're all different, to get what you need so that you can keep going and living and enjoying life.
Well, and I think that's unique when you move to a new country, and which are many of your clients obviously are they're moving from parts of Spain or from other
Mainly
countries.
from overseas, yeah.
Maybe from us. You're coming to a place where you're already, as a move, an international move, there's already stress. And if you're doing that during this transition, then you have a much lower level of resilience just for your physiology, right? And so that's something that you're speaking about, that I want to help women. You're going through this transition, and then now you have to understand and navigate a medical system and words and jargon, but also a system that isn't prepared to support you. So what I really, really focus on is honoring women to understand the science and to make it their ally in advocating for what they need. Everything, all the supports that you may need, whether they're lifestyle or medical, are all available here in Spain. But you may not know that because the person you're talking to doesn't know that. And that is where I'm trying to break down those barriers, that getting that information out there, not only about your own physiology as a woman, but about the healthcare system that you're coming to that's new, because the doctor's going to tell you that it's not available, or they might dismiss you, or they will discourage you. And that makes you have self-doubt. And that's like the last thing you need when you're making this international move. You want to feel like you're grounded. And I think that's where I've seen my work really help a lot in Spain, is with foreign women who are either coming and they have support, and then all of a sudden they get here and they go, well, how do I continue that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or they are coming here and they find themselves in the throes of the beginning of it, and they're lost and confused. And what is really troubling is that the beginning of perimenopause is when you're not sleeping well, when your anxiety is through the roof for no reason, and you're suddenly, have comprehension or word recall difficulties, all the brain symptoms.
I need to learn a new
Meanwhile,
language.
you're trying to navigate a new system. So it's a double whammy. And I think that the more women talk about it, the more women know that they can go get help and not feel ashamed about it, is what we can do. So, I'm glad that you're speaking about it more freely. I was just talking to a woman the other day who wrote this beautiful blog post, and it's an old friend of mine, and she was talking sort of covertly about how her hormones have shifted and how it's impacted her life. And I messaged her and I said, what you're speaking to is a direct result of the hormonal transition you're going through. And it's something that that you need to be aware, that your hormones impact the way you think, the way you feel, the way you function. They're really fundamental to who you are. And she responded to me saying, you're right. I hesitate to speak about it. And she has this blog that people are reading, but you're right. I should speak more about this topic so that more women don't feel so isolated or ashamed or alone. And I said, yeah, I'm right here with you when you're ready. So if I can help women in this transition to move to another country, also not be ashamed or worried or struggle in this aspect, which can be a decade or longer, I think that's why it's so important to me to do the work.
That's beautiful, Mardi. It's beautiful. Thank you. And
You're welcome.
it has been wonderful watching you evolve into evolve since you have moved here, and the level of confidence that it's brought to you. And yeah, watching you soar is a real pleasure, and I'm delighted to call you my friend.
Equally, darling. I remember when we were talking about, this new reinvention of who we were going to be and what we were going to do. And as we were exploring our different venues and opportunities,
Mm.
and when you landed on it, there was this, hey, move to Cantabria. And I remember saying, yeah, why weren't you guys here when we But okay. But I feel the same way. I feel like, you guys have found your groove. You're doing wonderful work and helping people really make a smooth transition. And it's necessary. We are about connection and community and that comes from the work that we do. And if we can continue to do that, I think that makes it a better place for our community. And I like that about the work that you do, that it's making a better community for everyone. And I feel like for my work, it's about making sure that community is healthy and thriving. And so it just couples really nice.
Yeah, yeah. I want anyone who moves to Cantabria to be happy here and to find their path and their journey, and to do that with as much ease as is possible. So yeah. Well,
So your
Marty,
work, it does that.
thank you very much for joining the Move to Cantabria podcast.
It
And I
was a
look
pleasure.
forward to many people listening to this conversation and to getting inspired and having confidence to embark on their own journey. So thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Move to Cantabria podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, press subscribe and check out our website, movetocantabria.com. Until next time, I'm Grace, and this is the Move to Cantabria podcast, celebrating life in this beautiful corner of northern Spain.